In the first week of the class, we will be learning the Hebrew Alef Bet. Aleph and Bet are the first two letters of the Hebrew consonantal system, which originally did not have any pure vowels. We will be learning those in a separate video. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph, and it is a silent letter in modern Hebrew. It originally was probably something like just the stoppage of air that you have when you say the word apple. You can see that your throat closes when you say apple, and it probably originally was pronounced that way. The second letter is the Hebrew letter Bet. This is pronounced either B as in boy or V as in vector. And we will be learning a little bit later the conditions under which the pronunciation changes. The third letter is the letter Gimel, and it is pronounced with a hard G, G. The fourth letter, Dalet, and it is pronounced D as in dog. Fifth is the letter Hey. It is pronounced at the beginning of a word or syllable as a H, an H sound as we would in English, but sometimes at the end of the word it is silent. Next is the letter Vav. Now, it is spelled wow, but is pronounced generally Vav. And it is either a V sound or it can be part of a long vowel, which we'll see in a different video. Next is the letter Zion. It is pronounced like our Z. Now the next letter is one of those which is a little bit difficult to pronounce if you're used to speaking English all the time, because it is a chet and it is called a guttural, and it is sort of pronounced in the back of the throat as in the name Loch or Bach. Those who might speak German would have an easier time understanding this particular sound, but practice it as it is a ch sound. It looks a little bit like a hey. Note the difference. The hey in modern typeset manuscripts has a little gap on the left-hand stroke, whereas the chet does not. Next is the letter tet. Originally, it probably was pronounced as an emphatic, kind of a t, but now most people do not distinguish between this and the final letter of the alphabet, which is a tav. Next is the letter yod. It is either pronounced like a y at the beginning of a word or syllable, or it can be part of a vowel. A little bit like the way that the Y acts in English. And then Kaf. Kaf is pronounced either as a hard K sound or a Ch sound, as in Loch or Bach, and we will be looking in a little bit at what determines how it is pronounced. You'll notice that I have two forms here, and we will see in a minute that one form is what occurs at the beginning or middle of a word, and then there is a final form on the end of a word. The next is the Hebrew letter Lamed, and it is pronounced like our L. Notice it is really the only letter that extends above the line, and it is therefore very easy to identify. Next is the Hebrew letter Mem, pronounced like our M. Notice it also has two different forms, one beginning and middle, one at the end of a word. The same is true of the Nun, which is like our sound N. Beginning and middle form, final form. This letter that looks almost like a circle is the Samech. The Samech has just a letter S as a sound. Now, ayin is similar to the Aleph in that in modern times in Hebrew, it is usually silent. This is not, however, true, for example, in the related language of Arabic. There it has more of a guttural kind of a r sound. But for our purposes, it will be silent. Following that is the letter Pei. It is either pronounced like our P, a hard P sound, or a F like our letter F. And we will see later what determines that difference. It is also a letter that has both a beginning and medial form and also a final form. The tzadi is a little bit different from what we are used to in that it combines two consonants in English, kind of a TS sound, as in cats. So a tzade, tzade. It also has two forms, that for the beginning and middle of a word and that for the end. The kof, although written in transliteration with a Q, pretty much has the same sound as the hard cough. It is called kof. Finally, resh, which is like our R, only for Hebrew speakers, it's really a little bit more like a French R, kind of spoken in the back of the throat. Resh. Don't worry too much about that pronunciation. Now, this letter here, you notice that the letter looks very similar. All that distinguishes it is a dot on the left hand fork or on the right hand. In the original Phoenician alphabet from which Hebrew developed, there was really only one sound assigned to this letter. But in Hebrew, that wasn't enough. And so one of those is now a sin, and it is today pronounced like our letter S, or a sheen. It's a SH sound. And that is especially important to recognize that it's the one with the dot on the upper right. The final letter of the alphabet is a tav, and it is pronounced like a T. Finally, I want to present the four letters which are considered gutturals, although occasionally also resh behaves like one. But the four gutturals are Aleph, He, Chet, and Ayin. And they generally, at least in their origin, were pronounced at the back of the throat. And so they behave differently. For example, in what kind of vowels they take and other kinds of things that we'll be learning about later. So they do operate a little bit differently than some of the other consonants, and we will be learning those in subsequent videos. It is very important that during this first week that you learn the alphabet very, very well. Learn the alphabet and then the vowel system, which we'll be addressing later. Also, learn the 6 Begad Kafat letters and the 5 Kemnifat letters and the 4 gutturals, because these will appear on some of the quizzes. So good luck!